Now I have the honor and privilege of introducing another person, and again, you notice I don't have a bio in front of me. There's only one person I know that can stand side by side with Dr. Greenleaf, and they can go back and forth about which one is the cool one and which one is the kind one. So, Dr. Skip Rizzo, if you could join us on stage. I had the privilege to meet Skip several years ago as we started to receive a donation from Soldier Strong of Brave Mind systems designed to help with PTSD through imaginal prolonged exposure. One of the most incredible things to me about Skip and the work he's done is veterans and active duty service members have been the center of his work from the beginning. We're so grateful for Skip. Anyone who knows the work of immersive technology over the last 3 decades knows these names, Skip and Walter, and both have joined us side by side to help continue to make sure we're thinking about this the right way and that we're keeping veterans at the center. So, Skip, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ann. Well, first off, what a friggin' inspirational video that was. I mean, it's so good when it's not me and Walter having to brag about VR, but actual patients talking about it like that. And, you know, I just got to say that Ann, Caitlin, the whole team that's involved in this, I mean, you've kind of given VR a home in a certain way. Certainly outside the VA, tons of VR going on, but this sort of puts a little stamp of approval on it. And what you're doing is transformative. I mean, this isn't just like, oh, we're adding some tools into the mix. You're changing the way a lot of healthcare is being delivered. And you're doing it in a way that I think, you know, personally from my slightly biased opinion, really cool. So, thanks for all this. Okay, so I've been asked to talk about virtual humans and the evolution of virtual humans in clinical care. So I'm going to cover a lot of different areas, work of other people, but near the end it's going to focus on some of the work that we've been doing at USC and outside. So why don't I just get started with my perfunctory. I'm at USC, halftime. Institute for Creative Technologies. We have a lab there, virtual human, whoa, there we go. Yeah, there. What's happening? It's changing here, but it's not changing up there. Oh, okay. Oh yeah, that's me. I'm controlling these things. All right. The MedVR lab, over the years, we started basically in 1995. I met Walter in 92, 93 at a VR and Disabilities conference. But some of the early work that, boy, this is confusing. I keep thinking that's the slide. All right, so some of the early work that we've done over the years, so early version of a Brave Mind for PTSD exposure, one of the first early versions of virtual classroom for testing children with attention deficit and attention process impairment, some early physical therapy games with LED markers and webcams, very primitive, and our first virtual patient application. I'm happy to say that in all these areas, things have evolved. And it's not just like building one-offs, it's like having a child. And you kind of bring it up, and it grows, and it evolves. And so all these areas, I'll talk about some of them today, but they've continued to evolve, and I've gotten a lot of satisfaction from seeing that within a university environment. So everybody's seen this slide a million times, but it's always to set the stage. You know, why use VR in clinical care? You know, basically, aviation simulation is the best metaphor. So like, you can test and train piloting ability under controlled stimulus conditions with precise measurement. We can test, train, teach, and treat human functioning under a range of controllable conditions as well. And it's the ultimate Skinner box. That's how I like to look at it, a controlled stimulus environment where we can systematically deliver things to people to address their needs, but also precisely measure their performance in those environments. I used to say back in early 2000s, when I'd be like at American Psychological Association, everybody was skeptical. I'd say, when you're flying home from this conference, would you prefer that your pilot was trained and certified in an aircraft simulator for dealing with wind shear or fog landings, or would you prefer they learned it from a book or death by PowerPoint or on-the-job training? And, you know, the old school psychologists that were kind of, you know, skeptical about all this started to, you know, get a little bit of a light bulb. And I still hold by that. Okay. So since 1994, specific phobias, that was where VR really got its clinical traction in the early days. Barbara Rothbaum, Larry Hodges' work, Max North. Now we have, this is a short list of the areas where VR has shown value in terms of the research and assessment, intervention, and as a tool for scientific research. And when you look back in time, you know, who would take that seriously? Well, phobics would, because they were very primed to even cartoonish graphics. But that was always the question, you know, can we fool the brain? And in fact, I don't know how well you can see that, but it says, Escher, get your ass up here. We could fool the brain with VR. That was one of the first things we found, was that, you know, even though your frontal lobes are telling you it's just a simulation, your limbic system is starting to react in an emotionally evocative way to the stimuli. So even if you didn't think it was the real thing, your brain reacted as if it was the real thing. And the good news is, along with the technology getting better, you know, we've developed a good scientific literature, and we've developed things that look a little bit more real. I always like to show this because I'm a cat fan, so I like to see this guy rescue this little kitty cat off the ledge. I think they have a dog function on this as well. Anyway, so what about virtual humans? Well, I remember seeing my first virtual human back in, in the late 90s, but the first real functional one was one for the Army that was for negotiation training. This is around 2004 or 5. And it was like you were negotiating with an Afghan warlord about distributing food. And it was for the military to teach people skills and tactics in that area. And I thought to myself, geez, therapy's a negotiation. Why can't we just take all this software and just change the dialogue and modify it and change the characters? Pretty much have to change everything. But that was how I got involved in the virtual human work at first, and I'll show you what that looked like. But back then, in the 90s, people weren't doing a lot of research. They weren't publishing a lot of papers. And I used to keep a standard thing. I'd do a tracking online up to 2008, and then I got distracted. But 2022, it's like 4 times what it was in 2008 with papers that are written in this area, because there's a lot going on, as we'll see. So we're going to talk for the first half about virtual humans on rails. And these are basic elements where characters, where they sometimes just serve as props just to make the world seem more like the real world. And then as exposure stimuli, where you can systematically ramp up the number of people or the way they engage with you. And then a couple of role play trainings for de-escalation with police, for folks on the autism spectrum, and as a tool for cognitive distraction that can help us to measure a child's susceptibility to distraction. I'll show some data on that. So first application I'd like to show, these were props. These were from 1999, Christine Botella's lab. They basically just put more characters in there. They really didn't even have any movement. They didn't talk to you or anything. They were just props. But the research that they did over the years with this showed it was as good as the real thing, that putting people in these environments where you can systematically ramp up the challenge of virtual humans in it actually had an impact on self-report. Now, a lot of the phobia work in this area is self-report questionnaires. Have some questions about that, but it's a start, and there are studies where they actually follow people up in real-world in vivo environments. So, as good as the real thing. Stephan Bouchard in 2017, social phobia, and this environment was in a cave environment that was actually looking at sexual trauma, some of the early work in that area for exposure therapy. But basically, he found the same thing, that VR characters and doing it in a virtual world with virtual humans was actually better than on a self-report questionnaire, I think the Hamilton scale. it was better than actually doing it with real actor people that you had to orchestrate and bring in. And it just wasn't feasible to do a systematic controlled clinical research test with real humans. So another positive sign. Fear of public speaking, that began, 1997, 98, whatever. Mel Slater's early work. Now you see Mel Slater's work. It's quite a bit more impressive in terms of the graphic fidelity of the characters. But these characters, would yawn and get bored with you and do all the things you don't want to have happen when you're doing a talk. But anyway, very primitive stuff. 2009, they incorporated eye tracking because they felt that you could scan how nervous somebody was by how much they looked around the crowd as opposed to just looking in one spot. Anyway, cool stuff evolved over the years, and now we have commercial applications.
These results are promising. What impact do you think it may have in the future?
You want that, but of course you always have an ankle biter.
Don't you think that your point of view has certain limitations? How did you choose your presentation's approach?
Hopefully you survive it. So, the interesting thing with this is that, we kind of give fear of public speaking a pass when it comes to clinical stuff. Like, this stuff is freely available or at a very low cost in standalone headsets because public speaking, well, you do a little bit of practice, you get over it, it's a skill, even though it could be considered a clinical condition in the DSM. So this is one we kind of give a pass for. But then jumping ahead, we're leaning towards this idea of self-help. Well, we do have some evidence that fear of heights can be successfully treated in a self-help mode with the guidance of a clinician, does a good diagnosis, and sends a headset home with the patient. As you can see, versus a control group, Dan Freeman's work. And they use a virtual human in the mix. It's sort of a guide. So it's sort of not really an active ingredient. It's a guide to walk you through the different stuff. And people are looking at machine learning approaches to systematically ramp up the provocative level, whether it's looking at heart rate variability or skin conductance as a driver. And now this work has really evolved with this 2022 paper. Again, self-report on intention, but with this automated application with people with schizophrenia and agoraphobia, excuse me, I lose my voice here, with the Game Change app that now is part of the XR Health group, positive results in worlds that are populated with characters that are provocative and help people at a pace they can handle, confront, and hopefully habituate or extinguish the fear response, and with a very difficult population. So some promising work there. Work with cue exposure for addiction. This work began with this study in Korea, which wasn't about treatment. It was looking at brain activation with addicts and non-addicts when presented with the cues of the stimuli of things that they were addicted to, smoking mainly in this version here, but drinking as well in a bar with virtual humans, because virtual humans are very provocative cues. You can maybe not have a giant urge state when you see a Budweiser neon sign, but if you see a bunch of people drinking and hanging out and waving at you, those cues induce an urge state that might be something that causes you to relapse. So by putting people in these kinds of environments, it's from Virtually Better Incorporated. This is, these video clips pasted into virtual worlds of characters that clinician can pop up. And in these worlds, the virtual humans are a little more active, even though they're fixed, they're on rails, they're video clips. But these kind of cues make it so that, perhaps if you administer this while someone's in rehab and they're a captive audience, they can't go out and use, and you do it repeatedly over and over and over, this is the theory, that eventually the potency of those cues, because you're using response prevention, the potency of those cues in the outside world is going to be less. So that work, Patrick Bordnick's work with a little bit higher fidelity characters, and provocative settings has gone on. He's documented raising urge states. I don't know if he's documented opioid reduction, but there's a lot of work being, basic work being done in this area now. And it follows from what we do in a lot of these areas with, being informed by theory, by behavioral theory, to begin our first starts. And then, we evolve the application as we get feedback from our patient and look at the clinical trials. In BraveMind, this is an application for exposure therapy for PTSD, and virtual humans figure regularly into this. A clinician has a control panel, can hit a button and make you in the middle of a crowded marketplace, or you can be alone in a city. And I just want to call out my colleague Russ Schilling, who was a program manager at Office of Naval Research. He was the one that saw the value in using this tool, developing this tool, the potential value at the time, and funded it through the Office of Naval Research, and then continued to fund a lot of work with virtual humans that we'll see in the future. So I think last year I probably talked a lot about this and some of the data, recent randomized controlled trial, documenting its value, particularly with people with comorbid depression and PTSD. The VA has embraced this along with Soldier Strong, a foundation that donates equipment to the VA and clinical training for clinicians. And in this case, this is just one character in this environment, and it's a perpetrator. It's kind of like the Terminator that can follow you around. It's really creepy. In fact, the story with this was that when we got the grant to build this out, we, reviewed what clinicians wanted. Clinicians weighed in, and they all said, you got to have a perpetrator. But then when they saw this guy and we could modify him, make him look different and so on, they said, oh, that's a little too creepy. I'm not sure if we're going to use it. And so it got used a little bit. It could follow you around as you navigated in these various worlds. It could turn up strategically. But the good news was, in our safety and feasibility trial published in 2019 with veterans, we found that no adverse events occurred. Small sample, admittedly, 11 treatment completers. And in addition to the main finding about we didn't mess people up more, we actually got good, clinically meaningful and statistically significant results. That was very hopeful at the time. Then COVID hit, and we didn't get funded again like we thought we would. And so the application sort of died on the vine until Soldier Strong just this week made a donation of $100K for us to be able to rebuild it. So I want to call out Chris Meek with Soldier Strong. They really have veterans' aims at heart, and they continue to support this work. Now, this one's really cool, and it's brand new. Real Encounters. It's, whenever we do trainings with BraveMind, everybody says, well, do you have something that's more like in vivo exposure, the kind of places and events that people, the veterans with PTSD, don't go to in the real world? And so the VA, working with Penumbra, has developed the start of a number of these applications. And I just dug up this term in virtuo from 2008. So in vivo is really like when you're in with real people, but in virtuo is when you're in these environments with virtual humans. And in this case, where realism was thought to be of value, we used spherical video and created a couple of worlds, real diner, real grocery, provocative thing, and a meat at the meat counter here. Where you
23.
Hi. Are you ready to order?
It can be ramped up.
Can I get you?
Now getting preliminary testing, and we had a subject matter expert team of Tyson Chung, Billy Rutherford of West Virginia, and Greg Rieger, who's been my colleague for many years, that really helped to weigh in on what are the elements of this. So this will be tested, and hopefully it'll serve a valuable tool, maybe even as a homework thing where you can send the headset home. In typical prolonged exposure, you do homework assignments. You say, all right, go to that grocery store you've been avoiding, or that restaurant. And then the next week, so how did it go? Oh, it was great. My suds were, 30, But, sometimes patients aren't so honest. Sometimes they say they went and did this kind of homework and approach these places. But now you can document it with an application like this, and then look at its impact on actual in vivo and have some kind of a way to document that as well, maybe some kind of phone tracking, GPS app, or have your client actually go to the place and take videos of actually being there, some kind of way, because we're relying on again, self-report, and sometimes patients want to please their clinician even if they didn't do what you asked them. Anyway, so I think this is great, and this is going to evolve, and hopefully we'll do a lot of cool research. Okay, another project I want to mention that involves virtual humans is our work with the Virtual Ukraine project, and this is a number of different projects rolled into one, and I hope everybody gets it. What's going on over there, it's a petri dish of trauma, and so we're trying to do the best we can. We've donated the code base for BraveMind to Ukrainian developers, and they have started the work, and we're doing fundraising now, but they've started the work of building out BraveMind-like worlds. This one here, you're in a building in a village that's been bombed out, and no virtual humans in the next year, but we want to build this one first because it's definitely functionally relevant. And it also evokes the Anne Frank, they're coming for me kind of a story. And in this version here, where the clinician is in control,
2 soldiers are walking.
Here we go. You actually have soldiers that are walking down the street, and you're hiding out in this space. And the idea of one of them peeling off and coming up and looking at you and so on. You'll see this guy is looking. But this still needs a lot of polish, but this was all built for free on the will and the drive of our Ukrainian developers. We're hoping that continues with our fundraising effort that I'll announce shortly. Another app that we've done within the Virtual Ukraine project is use spherical imagery of common places in Ukraine and making this not an automated virtual human thing, but an actual avatar-based, metaverse-type experience where a clinician could facilitate, much like what Noah Robinson is doing with Interworld, but doing it in this context for social support.
Сказать нам о своем опыте переезда в Румынию.
Я приехала в Румынию со своими дочками, у меня 2 дочки. Столкнулась с проблемой языкового барьера, конечно.
So this is our first
Первое время было тяжело. Но я записалась на курсы и в ближайшее время туда пойду.
Джулас, хотите что-то добавить или рассказать о своем опыте?
And it's really,
Я приехала в Румынию с семьей.
It's really about giving people a space where they can talk about the challenges, the losses, the grieving process in a safe place behind the avatar where sometimes people feel a little bit more comfortable. They can do it on a flat screen monitor or in a VR headset. And usually they start off talking about mundane kinds of things, and then as they get more comfortable, you start to hear some of the stories. And the clinicians, this was actually done in Bucharest, and the clinician there is providing feedback as to what are the common things that people talk about so we can inform the development of the actual exposure therapy applications. Although our clinical team in Kiev is doing regular active therapy, doing a lot of EMDR work and hearing those stories. So we've got about 10 scenarios that we're going to build in that environment, but we're actually going to be announcing a fundraiser for this to try to build out the content. And I was actually quite shocked when I talked to our Ukrainian developer. She estimated that each world only costs about 10K in Ukrainian dollars to build out, whereas this same thing at USC would be a couple hundred. It's just crazy. So hopefully we're not going to have to raise a ton of money and be able to build this stuff out. Okay. In another area, and this is a project that Walter and I worked on with Google, and it was for police, not as a PTSD treatment, but as a de-escalation obstacle course, if you will. And they had built out 3 worlds, and each of these characters were designed to be real pain in the asses, you know, real provocative, you know, something that gets on your last nerve as a police officer. And I'll show what that looks like here in a second. But as a way to help people to learn the skills for de-escalating a situation rather than ramping it up. So, and we looked at this as sort of a toe in the water with the police force, because their mental health services using VR are non-existent. So maybe this is a foot in the door to get them inured to the use of VR and simulation technology. They certainly use it for tactical training. But anyway, this is the upper right is a home visit character.
You can't be serious! What's going on? Why are you here?
She's designed to be really annoying, kind of like the woman in Ozark.
My name is none of your damn business!
All right, enough of you. This is a mentally ill person harassing people in a bus.
Why do I have to give you my ID? You can call me Brian, that's all you need to know.
Because we know that a lot of times people...
Get to the point. I'm listening.
People get into trouble not because they're criminals.
Am I under arrest?
Because their crime is being mentally ill. Okay, and this is one that we're doing with the LAPD. Again, domestic violence, possibility, home situations, things that are thought to be very emotionally evocative and very common in the police. So these are just startups used where virtual humans are essential to the element of the application. Moving to another population with role-playing, folks on the autism spectrum. And this is from 2002, Sue Cobb's work, where it was just basic training on a flat screen monitor where you selected options for where you would sit, who you would talk to, and very basic stuff at the time. But she generated some good research in that area. And that inspired a whole bunch of research, particularly the work of Florio, which I think is really impressive with the amount of content they have for this kind of role-play training with folks on the spectrum and other folks as well. It's not just, I think anything you design for this population, you can get dual use for other areas. We did some work with the Dan Marino Foundation with Virtual Humans, and you probably have seen this before, but it's a job interview training system. And you can manipulate the types of characters, the job backdrops, and the provocative nature of each character. So this character in this backdrop in nice mode.
I'm glad you're here. In a minute, we'll get into some questions about the job. But before we do, why don't you just tell me about yourself?
Or we could make her neutral or nasty, or we could pick a different character and make her a little more provocative.
This is an entry-level position. I guarantee there will be things you won't like about this job. That said, what's the most important thing you think you're looking for in a job?
Now keep in mind, there's no real AI here. This is all on Rails. You can set up automated presentation of questions. Maybe the software picks up when there's a gap in your response, and then it goes on to the next question. Clinician has a control panel, can modulate the presentation of different types of challenging or not challenging questions. And as I said, variety of characters, backdrops, and so on. I don't want to show you the experience or the testimonial of somebody who's gone through this, talking about her experience.
It's a good program, and it teaches you how to do an interview, and it teaches you how to be in an interview situation with another person.
And did you see your performance improve? Did you get better?
I get better every single time I do it. I get better.
And this is data from the first study showing baseline interviews are red. Before and after at the end. Oh, somebody got the Hendrix joke, huh? All right. And so vocational counselors rating face-to-face interviews at the beginning, then going through the VITA application, vocational interview training agents, and showing progressive improvements, 64 subjects, and showing that what's learned in VR in a way that might appeal to this population, where they feel comfortable, they're not overwhelmed, like maybe in a live face-to-face, human-to-human interview. This sort of a training wheels thing matters in the real world. And we see there was another study recently that came out also documenting this. Now, the cool thing with job interviewing is that it's sort of an application that matters for a lot of folks. So we gave our software to U.S. vets downtown LA, and I want to pop that
I
up.
want you to check this out. It is a virtual reality program that is developed at the University of Southern California, and it's helping veterans rejoin the workforce.
They come out of the service. It's hard to find a job. It's definitely a process.
Now, enter the Virtual Interactive Training Agent. It was originally created to help autistic job applicants handle interviews. Then developers realized it could help veterans too.
So, we delivered that at the time. Standalone headsets weren't so ubiquitous when we were developing it, so we just made it so you could do it on a flat screen. And so it doesn't always have to be immersive. However, experimenting all the time with different delivery modes as some of these types of systems get lower costs and we can distribute them more widely. So we had done a little trial with
thanks for coming in.
Magic
How's it
Leap,
going?
even though it was overpriced.
Hi.
But
It's going
an augmented
okay.
reality
Thank you.
application for this. So that's
Why
the
don't you
real
start by telling me about
room.
yourself?
You can see her talking to the empty chair, but seeing the character.
Well, my name is Grace.
Anyway, but there are also
and,
companies now that are developing
I now can choose which
standalone
interviewer
headset
I'd like to
immersive
be interviewed by, so
environments
we'll go with
for
Jeremy.
the same process. And I think it's pretty good work, even though I think the characters could
Welcome
be
to
done a
Body
little better.
Source.
But
So glad you
I
could
think
make
it's
it.
sufficient.
Let's get started. What kind of questions would you like me to ask you?
So I'm now in the interview room. I can take a look around and see that I am immersed.
Okay.
But now I can select what type of
Another
questions I'd like.
application,
So let's
this
start
one
with classic.
focusing on social skills, was work done at University of Texas in Dallas at the Center for Brain Health, and really cool work, but it was using Second Life, where now you've got avatar-driven interaction. So for folks on the spectrum, the trainee and two trainers that occupied the avatars and fostered different levels of social engagement and so on. And in this early work, I think this was 2016 or 17, they actually did pre-post fMRI showing after intensive training in this type of system that you saw more activations in higher level of activation in brain regions associated with social understanding. The first study was with just a trial with 4 clients that evolved, and I think this came out in 2019, and that work has continued. And I want to show you what that looks like, because it's an avatar-driven world, so it's human resource intensive. You need trainees to occupy the avatars, but I think it's pretty cool.
Here at the Brain Performance Institute at the Center for Brain Health, we're using virtual technology to help individuals learn social skills. Charisma is a name that we've given to our software program combined with the clinical application. It really is a platform that allows people to practice social skills in a safe environment and practice them in the virtual world, but the skills that they learn transfer into the real world.
We found that Charisma is a great tool for increasing social vibrancy, and part of why it's such a great tool is this virtual reality environment creates a safe place for people to explore different ways to interact socially, and they become more creative, more confident, and more enthusiastic about social engagement.
Okay. Next. Oh, and this was the last I had been tracking this, is 2001, but showing some positive results in this application. As well, working with kids in another area. This is the latest version of the virtual classroom. I think you might have seen an earlier version earlier on. Basically, a child wears a headset. You're seeing what they see as they turn around. They have to track on a continuous performance task on the board, hitting a response button where they see an A followed by an X. Meanwhile, the characters are distractors. They're passing notes or talking or playing with a cell phone and so on. Anyway, in our research with this, with over 1,000 children, I think 837 neurotypicals and 245 ADHD kids, and this is being written up right now, This is across the age span. And what you see here is the red bars are neurotypicals, and you see omission errors, one of the common inattention metrics. How many targets do they actually miss? No regard to where they're looking or anything. And you see the comparison with little boys here with the ADHD group showing way more missed targets, but a decline over the age span, which is what you would expect and like in a normative data set. Same thing with females. Little girls, you see the same kind of a pattern. Now, when you look at the distractibility, though, as measured by head tracking and total movement, we've got more fine-grained measures, but generally on this, if you look at head movement, you see with boys, you see that same pattern emerge, and they're distractible, they're missing targets and looking around, the hyperactivity component being measured. Little girls, it's a little bit different. And this is part of our view that boys are diagnosed 4 times as much as girls. But I don't think that means that females are less susceptible to ADHD. They may manifest the inattentive type, and they don't show that hyperactivity energy. And so you see fundamental differences, not even a difference at age 8 and 9. It gets close to a difference further on, but they're not moving around as much. But they're missing as many targets comparatively. So there's a lot of research to be done in this area, but it's key to have virtual humans as part of the naturalistic distractors. Okay, now onto the really interesting stuff. Going beyond just role-playing and props and delivering exposure, moving on to more software-endowed virtual characters that have natural language processing, or more evolved language model, or have some levels of AI thrown into the mix. And I want to show some of those. If I can get my voice back here, what's going on? So I'm going to show mostly our work in these different areas for clinical training and in other areas as we'll go through them. So with that, USC ICT has worked in virtual humans over the last 24 years, since 1999. And one area that was a focus was virtual patients. So back in 2007, after incubating the idea and getting a little bit of money to build this from the negotiation training, we have a sexual assault patient. The first patient was a male resistant client, but our next one was this one that we tested with medical students. And here's what that looked like, even though the character is very primitive.
Hello, my name is Dr. Davis.
Hello.
What brings you into the office today?
Something bad happened that night.
I'm sorry to hear that. Can you tell me what happened?
I was in the car with Eddie, and he stopped the car and wanted me to kiss him, but when I tried to stop him, he threatened me with a knife.
So this guy in the beginning is kind of skeptical.
When did this happen to you, Justina?
Impoverished. It's got limited gestures.
I was so scared.
Maybe about
I thought
300
I might die.
utterances that were possible. But you see, as he gets involved with it and he gets engaged.
It must have been very tough for you.
Starts showing some empathy. He starts doing follow-ups.
Yeah,
and that was like
the
excitement in the very beginning days with this.
Do you find yourself still being bothered by what happened?
Whenever thoughts of the event pop into my head, I put my iPod on real loud.
You mentioned thoughts pop into your head. What kind of thoughts
so you
pop
get
into
the
your
idea
head?
that we got encouraged early on, even with impoverished characters, that we had something here that could be a credible interactive tool. And I think there's a company here doing this kind of work out in the exhibition hall. I haven't checked it out yet, but I think that people suspend disbelief when they get credible responses from the character and they start engaging like the real thing. So we started building other ones. I want to show one we developed in 2012, I think, for the USC School of Social Work.
Good afternoon, Sergeant Castilla.
What brings you in today?
Well, my wife told me she thought I should talk to someone. She's been pretty concerned about me since a soldier suicided on base last week.
So, suicide assessment.
Did you happen to know the soldier?
Yes. He wasn't a friend, but I met the Marine once or twice. He seemed normal at the time. I guess I'm afraid I might end up like him.
Do you have any plans to hurt yourself?
No. It certainly crossed my mind, especially lately. I just need it all to stop. Sometimes I can't handle it.
Okay, so that work has evolved and led to the development of a virtual patient toolkit that allows clinicians to author content relatively easy. It's not as easy as we had hoped, but you, just like with the job interview stuff, you pick different characters, different backdrops, and so on. You've got a wide range of characters. You can modify them in different ways, and you know, go beyond the see one, do one, teach one model to maybe a more effective and orchestrated way of doing training. That led to work we did at the VA with Greg Rieger and Aaron Knorr, motivational interview training.
Hey, how's it going?
So another resistant client.
I'm good. Look, this is my wife's idea.
Okay, I'm going to jump through this because I can see I've only got a few minutes. I've got a lot more to cover. Anyway, the data on this, a randomized control trial, and just briefly, and I can go into more detail off to the side, but basically adding this virtual human training component for motivational interviewing led to better performance in an actual live encounter with a standardized actor patient. And these encounters were videotaped and rated by blind reviewers who didn't know whether it was the control group that just got the online training or if it was the experimental group. They didn't know if it was the baseline, the post-training, or the 3-month follow-up training. So really good, unbiased motivational interviewing assessment, and found that people did much better that went through this kind of virtual human training. Now, I want to jump to another area, and again, this is work that my colleague Russ Schilling helped support. He had this harebrained idea that maybe we could build virtual humans that would be healthcare support agents. So SimCoach was born in around 2010, 2011, and it was basically an online presence that a veteran could go and talk to get information about PTSD, substance use disorder, and so on. And the character could ask the user questions that were within the available screening questions, and if you reached a certain threshold, character might switch into, hey, it looks like you're having some trouble here. Perhaps, you know, if you punch your zip code in this little box, I can pop up a list of providers in your area. If you want, you can ask me questions about what therapy involves for PTSD or whatnot. So let me just let him introduce himself.
Well, I'm not a real person, if that's what you're asking. But I'm based on the personality and experiences of real soldiers and Marines. I'm still just a piece of software, but I'm getting better all the time. So hopefully I can be a helpful piece of software to talk to.
So that illustrates one of the key things. We're not trying to fool people that this is a real person. You know, you're right up front with it. This is just software, but it can possibly be helpful. And fast forward to 2023, a project I'm doing in Boston with a company called Conversage, and we're working with Mass General to address healthcare professional burnout and to provide the same kind of safe, private, anonymous interaction where people can do self-assessment and learn about their status. Let me show you what that looks like.
Hi, my name is Taylor. It is so nice to meet you. You are about to walk through a demonstration of my capabilities. I am going to skip some of the introductory conversation I would have with a real user. Also, for this demo, I will only be accessing a small amount of the knowledge that I have. My trainers have told me I'm not skilled enough yet to go beyond those areas.
Get it right out front. It's not the real thing. Here's a little bit of a dialogue.
Let's start by talking about your work life. On average, how many hours per week do you work?
About 60.
That's not easy. Generally, do you enjoy the work you do?
No, not anymore.
I'm sorry to hear that. How well are you able to focus on your assigned tasks and duties?
I can.
So then she might slip into, if you want, you can fill out the professional quality of life assessment or a variety of these other self-assessment questionnaires, and she can give you feedback, give you tips, tactics, self-help, so on and so forth. This is being tested at Mass General now, and I'm hoping that, I'm hoping that it's successful. Anyway, what about giving virtual humans a capacity to sense the user? This was another project that I worked on with Russ Schilling, and it was called Detection and Computational Analysis of Psychological Signals. And basically, it was taking a sim coach-like character and using cameras and microphones to track the user's facial expression, vocal prosody, and so on. And so it went from sim coach to sim sensei. And here's an example of that, where you'll see the user being tracked, their facial expression and their vocal prosody, while they're being interviewed.
So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
So build rapport.
That's good. Where are you from originally?
I'm from Los Angeles.
Oh, I'm from LA myself.
Yeah, she lives in a
When was the
computer
last
there.
time?
Anyway, we're going to jump ahead.
When was the last time you felt really happy?
So these open-ended projective
When
questions.
was the last time? I don't know. Yeah, I'm not someone who's really like, I don't have any real highs. I feel like I'm a level person. It's just happy. I guess to answer your question, probably a couple months ago.
I noticed you were hesitant on that one. Would you say you were generally a happy person?
In real time, the character can detect that discomfort or distress and have a variety of different ways it responds to that. And we've often found that people, when they did the follow-up, they actually gave a lot more information. And at the end, you could also look at comparing it with screening measures of PTSD, depression, anxiety, as sort of the ground truth, self-report. We could correlate it with people that were high distress and low distress to certain behavioral characteristics, and particularly the vocal parameters. That really was a window into the soul with this work. And smile intensity, for example, not whether you smiled, but how long and how intense was that smile. So these are all things that we could pick up on as a research tool to add a third leg to the assessment stool. We can get self-report, we can get psychophys, but now capturing, quantifying, and inferring from behavior as to the user's state. I know it sounds a little creepy, but it may have some value here, and it's going to make interaction with virtual humans more credible. And the good news is people like it, or they are more willing to self-disclose information. So we compared telling people it was just software, which they got in both groups, or that it was an avatar and that there was someone in the back room, Wizard of Oz, controlling the character. And what we found was that less fear of impression management and evaluation, more intensity of sadness displayed, and more comfortable disclosing personal information. Comments like this, and I want to show you an actual example of one of these comments. These were two folks that came to our lab, did our study, and then went on to another study in the building, and they were on camera getting prepared for it, and they're just having a natural conversation, and they mention our work.
I think they're talking. Have you been here before? Yeah. The virtual human, is that the one you did? I think that's what she's doing. So they're probably seeing how two humans interact, and then how a virtual human. Yeah. I think it is awesome because it's a lot easier. I don't know why, but it's just a lot easier to talk to somebody like that than a real person, because I think you feel judged. You know what I mean? And all this other stuff. I
About
can
the
understand why they won't.
experience where maybe this isn't as creepy as people anticipated it would be, interacting with synthetic agents. We did another study with returning vets coming back from Afghanistan. They filled out the post-deployment health assessment, a checklist of symptoms, went through checking no to everything pretty much. And then those same questions were asked from the virtual agent, and people were more likely to endorse those questions compared to the standard military version, which was on your military record, and anonymized version where we actually gave them a paper and pencil thing. Anyway, all this work has led to a project that I'm very excited about through the VA, through the Mission Daybreak program. And this is taking a virtual human, putting it on a mobile app for wellness, for interaction, daily, short-term little bits of interaction that can provide helpful information, and for implementing a safety plan if somebody's signals picked up from the watch, Apple Watch or whatever, start to show problems, or the phone doesn't travel as much, if you can track that stuff. I'd like to let him introduce himself here.
Hello there, and welcome to Battle Buddy, where we combine conversational AI, sensing, wearables, and mobile technology to provide evidence-based wellness content, create and walk veterans in crisis through their personal suicide safety plan, and connect them to appropriate care when needed. My name is Kevin, and I'll be guiding you through our vision for suicide prevention and wellness.
Hold on, there's something more there.
Hello there.
Yep. All right, I'm sorry, but there was a secondary clip in there. Anyway, all this stuff is involving with various AI, with our Meet Taylor app. That's originally started with Watson, now is using ChatGPT, but on very tight guardrails, by the way. But I want to move on just to mention, and I think there's a problem with this because there was a video that didn't run. Anyway, ChatGPT, co-authoring a radiology paper, passing the medical board. This is a ChatGPT clinical tracking tool. They can pick up voice, it has voice recognition, can track your track what you're saying and put it into a report of a session that you can edit down and so on. So when we think about traditional therapy, well, maybe that's not so much it, but how far are we from having AI-driven therapists? Oh, Dan, can you just drop out of this? I think there's some kind of a glitch because it's not running the videos, and then turn the slideshow off and start it up again, reboot it. Because I really want to have this show up. Yeah, turn it off and then reboot it. Yeah, there we go. And fire it up again and just get back to that slide. I'm sorry about this glitch, but I want to end on a bang here. Yeah, it's near the end. Yeah. Sorry about asking you to do this. Yeah. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Okay, yeah, we got the video back. All right, so the ChatGPT stuff, da-da-da-da. Okay, so traditional therapy. AI, how far are we away from this?
Hi, I'm Ellie. Thanks for coming in today. I was created to talk to people in a safe and secure environment. I'm not a therapist, but I'm here to learn about people and would love to learn about you. I'll ask a few questions to get us started. And please feel free to tell me anything. Your answers are totally confidential. Are you okay with it?
So, what about AI therapists? They're always available. They never get bored with their tiresome stories. They have encyclopedic knowledge of every clinical condition, every differential diagnosis, encyclopedic knowledge of evidence-based care. They remember everything you've said to it and can do deep dive analytics. Those are powerful tools for a therapist to have. But there's more to therapy. And I think, as Walter said yesterday, AI isn't going to replace clinicians. It's going to replace the ones that don't leverage AI. And so there's powerful tools in AI that I think can help us to do our jobs better, because we know that a good percent of the variance in clinical outcomes is based on therapeutic alliance, on the connection, the human connection. And so I think this is going to be the most contentious issue, and clinician empathy as well. Even though ChatGPT beat out a bunch of docs that provided healthcare feedback online, as rated by the panel of licensed healthcare professionals, 79% thought the ChatGPT response was better than the real human. But this is going to be a contentious issue, and we got to prepare for it and build guardrails around doing it ethically and professionally. My last slide, I do these TikTok-like short 15-second, 30-second videos for a marine application. They're designed to be totally informal, with just little tips and tactics as a person wearing an Apple Watch or sensor has different experiences, and they do self-report things. The whole project we're doing at USC. So I want to show you just a little brief.
Here are the 3 warning signs that your friend needs help. Number 1, total change in their typical behavior. Instead of hanging out or going and doing this, all of a sudden that stops. Second sign, low energy. If you know somebody.
So you get that. Now, this is deepfake, Skip. And what this is taking that video, the content from that video, 30 seconds of my voice, building a vocal model to emulate my voice. Now I can type in with text, or ChatGPT, or any large language model could input data into this. But you can build out these clips, and this is all off-the-shelf free software to build this, as you'll see. You can type in whatever you want. So we had a little fun with this one.
Congratulations. You have no to low risk of general anxiety disorder. You can breathe a sigh of relief and pat yourself on the back for being such a cool cucumber. But hey, let's not get too cocky now. Just because you're not at risk of general anxiety disorder doesn't mean you should ignore your mental health. Taking care of your mind is just as important as taking care of your body. So why not take this opportunity to try some relaxation techniques like meditation, yoga, or just enjoying a good old-fashioned nap. And if you ever do start to feel overwhelmed, don't hesitate to reach out for help. But for now, let's celebrate your low-risk score with a virtual high five. Hell yeah.
Yeah, hell yeah. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I went over.